Hello world. Um, the stream isn't giving me all my statistics. Whatever. Hope everyone's doing well. We will start streaming in a few minutes. We'll start reading in a few minutes. Hello. You're here right as I started. Jeez. Hopefully, yeah, the camera's back. Who knows? I don't feel like I did anything different. Also, we have character sheet. I haven't made it fancy or anything yet, but sometime soon it'll look like a old piece of paper, all crinkled and 1800s-esque. But yeah. I guess that's about it. I guess I can start reading. Let's see. Last time we basically just got introduced to Mary. She lost her father 10 years ago, and then about 6 years ago, someone said, you are owed justice. Here's some pearls. Or like, whatever. And then like today, she's like, you are still owed justice. Come to this location. And yeah, so we are at, I guess I should double check to make sure I spelled his name correctly. The story of the bald-headed man. Oh yeah, I'm going to update the stream title. I forgot to do that yesterday. Yeah. Thaddeus, not... Okay. Both are completely nonsensical names. And his name is The Story of the Bald-Headed Man. Okay. Also, the last couple streams have been way better in terms of dropped frames. We've only been a couple hundred the last few days, whereas I remember we had like 100,000 frames at one point. Okay, cool. I guess I'll get started. Yeah, I don't think I did anything differently, but who knows? Maybe my iPad was too close to my computer or something ridiculous. All right. When I first determined to make this communication to you, said he, I might have given you my address, but I feared that you might disregard my request and bring unpleasant people with you. I took the liberty, therefore, of making an appointment in such a way that my man Williams might be able to see you first. I have complete confidence in his discretion, and he had orders, if he were dissatisfied, to proceed no further in the matter. You'll excuse these precautions, but I am a man of somewhat retiring, and I might even say refined tastes, and there is nothing more unaesthetic than a policeman. I have a natural shrinking from all forms of rough materialism. I seldom come in contact with the rough crowd. I live, as you see, with some little atmosphere of elegance around me. I may call myself a patron of the arts. It is my weakness. The landscape is a genuine Corot, and though a connoisseur might perhaps throw a doubt upon the Salvator Rosa, there cannot be the least question about the Bourgeois. Bouguereau. I am partial to the modern French school. Oh, also fun fact, in case you missed it, this Sholto guy just up and said, like in the first sentence of meeting Mary Mortson, that her father was dead. She wasn't sure about it for the last 10 years, and then he just like, I'm so sorry about the passing of your father. He had a weak heart or something like that. Um, You'll excuse me, Mr. Sholto, said Miss Mortson, but I am here at your request to learn something which you desire to tell me. It is very late, and I should desire the interview to be as short as possible. At the best, it must take some time, he answered, for we shall certainly have to go to Norwood and see Brother Bartholomew. We shall all go and try if we can get the better Brother Bartholomew. We can go and try if... Okay. He is very angry with me for taking the course which has seemed right to me. I had quite high words with him last night. You cannot imagine what a terrible fellow he is when he is angry. If we are to go to Norwood, it would perhaps be as well to start at once, I ventured to remark. He laughed until his ears were quite red. That would hardly do, he cried. I don't know what he would say if I brought you in that sudden way. No, I must prepare you by showing you how we all stand to each other. In the first place, I must tell you that there are several points in the story of which I am myself ignorant. I cannot lay the facts before you as far as I know them myself. I can only lay the facts before you. My father was, as you guessed, Major John Sholto. Okay. So this is Major John Sholto. He retired some 11 years ago and came to live at Pondicherry Lodge, in Upper Norwood. He had prospered in India and brought back with him a considerable sum of money, a large collection of valuable curiosities, and a staff of native servants. With these advantages, he brought himself a house and lived in great luxury. My twin brother Bartholomew and I were the only children. Twin brother. That's... So there is a cliche that existed for a while about a twin always being responsible for the crime. And in the Sherlock Holmes remakes, or at least like the one with Benedict Cumberbatch, one of the things he says is, it's never twins. It's never twins. Just trying to like shake off the cliche. And I think it might have been the original Sherlock Holmes that like started the cliche, because Sherlock Holmes was like one of if the first like successful like detective series. And whenever there's a twin, you just have to keep that in mind. I very well remember the sensation which was caused by the disappearance of Captain Mortson. We read the details in the papers, and, knowing that he had been a friend of our father's, we discussed the case freely in his presence. He used to join in our speculations as to what could have happened. I guess I'll add Brother Bartholomew Sholto, twin of the Deus. Mm-hmm. Okay. He used to join in our speculations as to what could have happened. Never for an instant did we suspect that he had the whole secret hidden in his own breast, that of all men he alone knew the fate of Arthur Mortson. We did know, however, that some mystery, some positive danger, overhung our father. He was very fearful of going out alone, and he always employed 2 prize fighters to act as porters at Pondicherry Lodge. Williams, who drove you tonight, was one of them. He was once lightweight champion of England. Our father would have never told us what was he feared, but he had a most marked aversion to men with wooden legs. On one occasion, he actually fired his revolver at a wooden-legged man who proved to be a harmless tradesman canvassing for orders. We had to pay a large sum to hush the matter up. My brother and I used to think this is a mere whim of my father's, but events have since led us to change our opinion. If Williams, the prize fighter from the lightweight champion of England, comes up again, I'll add him to our list of characters. Early in 1882, my father received a letter from India, which was a great shock to him. He nearly fainted at the breakfast table when he opened it, and from that day he sickened to his death. What was in that letter we could never discover, but I could see as he held it that it was short and written in a scrawling hand. He had suffered for years from an enlarged spleen, but he had become rapidly worse, and towards the end of April we were informed that he was beyond all hope, and that he wished to make a last communication to us. When we entered his room, he was propped up with pillows and breathing heavily. He besought us to lock the door and to come upon either side of the bed. Then, grasping our hands, he made a remarkable statement to us, in a voice which was broken as much by emotion as by pain. I shall try and give it to you in his own very words. I have only one thing, he said, which weighs upon my mind at this supreme moment. It is my treatment of poor Mortson's orphan. The cursed greed which has been my besetting sin through life has withheld her from the treasure, half at least of which should have been hers, and yet I have made no use of it myself. So blind and fool a thing is avarice. The mere feeling of possession has been so dear to me that I could not bear to share it with another. See that chaplet dipped with pearls beside the quinine bottle? Even that I could not bear to part with, although I got it out with the design of sending it to her. You, my sons, will give her a fair share of the Agra treasure, but send her nothing, not even the chaplet, until I am gone. After all, men have been as bad as this and have recovered. I will tell you how Mortson died, he continued. He had suffered for years from a weak heart, but he concealed it from everyone. I alone knew it. When in India, he and I, through a remarkable chain of circumstances, came into possession of a considerable treasure. I brought it over to England, and on the night of Mortson's arrival, he came straight over here to claim his share. He walked over from the station and was admitted by my faithful old Lal Chowdar, who is now dead. Mortson and I had a difference of opinion as to the division of the treasure, and we came to heated words. Mortson had sprung out of his chair in a paroxysm of anger, when he suddenly pressed his hand to his side. His face turned a dusky hue, and he fell backwards, cutting his head against the corner of the treasure chest. When I stooped over him, I found to my horror that he was dead. For a long time I sat half distracted, wondering what I should do. My first impulse, of course, was to call for assistance, but I could not but recognize that there was every chance that I would be accused of his murder. His death at the moment of a quarrel, and the gash in his head, would be black against me. Again, an official inquiry could not be made without bringing out some facts about the treasure, which I was particularly anxious to keep secret. He had told me that no soul upon earth knew where he had gone. There seemed to be no necessity why any soul should ever know. I was still pondering over the matter when, looking up, I saw my servant, Lal Chowdar, in the doorway. He stole in and bolted the door behind him. Do not fear, Sahib, he said. No one need know that you have killed him. Let us hide him away, and who is the wiser? I did not kill him, said I. Lal Chowdar shook his head and smiled. I heard it all, Sahib, said he. I heard your quarrel, and I heard the blow, but my lips are sealed. All are asleep in the house. Let us put him away together. That was enough to decide me. If my own servant could not believe my innocence, how could I hope to make good before 12 foolish tradesmen in a jury box? Lal Chowdar and I disposed of the body that night, and within a few days the London papers were full of the mysterious disappearance of Captain Mortston. You will see, from what I say, that I can hardly be blamed in the matter. My fault lies in the fact that we concealed not only the body, but also the treasure, and that I have clung to Mortson's share as well as to my own. I wish you, therefore, to make restitution. Put your ears down to my mouth. The treasure is hidden in At this instant, a horrible change came over his expression. His eyes stared wildly, his jaw dropped, and he yelled, in a voice which I can never forget, "Keep him out! For Christ's sake, keep him out!" We both stared round at the window behind us, which his gaze was fixed. A face was looking in at us out of the darkness. We could see the whitening of the nose where it was pressed against the glass. It was a bearded, hairy face with wild, cruel eyes and an expression of concerted malevolence. My brother and I rushed towards the window, but the man was gone. When he returned to my father, his head had dropped and his pulse had ceased to beat. We searched the garden that night, but found no sign of the intruder, save that just under the window a single foot mark was visible in the flower bed. But for that one trace, we might have thought that our imaginations had conjured up the wild, fierce face. We soon, however, had another and more striking proof that there were secret agencies at work all around us. The window of my father's room was found open in the morning, his cupboards and boxes had been rifled, and upon his chest was fixed a torn piece of paper with the words, "The sign of the four," scrawled across it. What the phrase meant, or who our secret visitor may have been, we never knew. As far as we can judge, none of my father's property had actually been stolen, though everything had been turned out. My brother and I naturally associated this peculiar incident with the fear which haunted my father during his life, but it is still a complete mystery to us. The little man stopped to relight his hookah and puffed thoughtfully for a few moments. We had all sat absorbed, listening to his extraordinary narrative. At the short account of his father's death, Miss Morton had turned deadly white, and for a moment I feared that she was about to faint. She rallied, however, on drinking a glass of water, which I quietly poured out for her from a Venetian carafe upon the side table. Sherlock Holmes leaned back in his chair with an abstracted expression, and the lids drawn low over his glittering eyes. As I glanced at him, I could not but think how on that very day he had complained bitterly of the commonplaceness of life. Here, at least, was a problem which could tax his sagacity to the most. Mr. Theodus Sholto looked from one to the other of us with an obvious pride at the effect of his story had produced, and then continued between the puffs of his overgrown pipe. "My brother and I," said he, "were, as you may imagine, much excited as to the treasure which my father had spoken of. For weeks and for months we dug and delved in every part of the garden without discovering its whereabouts. It was maddening to think that the hiding place was on his very lips at the moment that he died. We could judge the splendor of the missing riches by the chaplet which he had taken out. Over this chaplet my brother Bartholomew and I had some little discussion. The pearls were evidently of great value, and he was averse to part with them, for, between friends, my brother was himself a little inclined to my father's fault. He thought, too, that if we parted with the chaplet, he might give rise to gossip and finally bring us into trouble. It was all that I could do to persuade him to let me find out Miss Morton's address and send her a detached pearl at fixed intervals, so that at least she might never feel destitute." "It was a kindly thought," said our companion earnestly. "It was extremely good of you." The little man waved his hand deprecatingly. "We were your trustees," he said. "That was the view which I took of it, though Brother Bartholomew could not altogether see it in that light. We had plenty of money ourselves. I desired no more." What a foreign concept in today's society. "Besides, it would have been such bad taste to have treated a young lady in so scurvy a fashion. Le mauvais goût mène au crime. The French have a very neat way of putting these things. The worst... I don't know what a couple of these words are. Sorry. Our difference of opinion on the subject went so far that I thought it best to set up rooms for myself. So I left Pondicherry Lodge, taking the old Kitmitcar and Williams with me. Kitmitcar. Yesterday, however, I learned that an event of extreme importance has occurred. The treasure has been discovered. I instantly communicated with Miss Morton, and it only remains for us to drive out to Norwood and demand our share. I explained my views last night to Brother Bartholomew, so we shall be expected, if not welcome, visitors. Mr. Thaddeus Sholto ceased, and sat twitching on his luxurious settee. We all remained silent, with our thoughts upon the new development which the mysterious business had taken. Holmes was the first to spring to his feet. You have done well, sir, from first to last, said he. It is possible that we may be able to make you some small return by throwing some light upon that which is still dark to you. But, as Miss Morton remarked just now, it is late, and we had best put the matter through without delay. Our new acquaintance very deliberately coiled up the tube of his hookah and produced from behind a curtain a very long frogged topcoat with astrakhan collars and cuffs. This he buttoned tightly up, in spite of the extreme closeness of the night, and finished his attire by putting on a rabbit-skin cap with hanging lappets, which covered the ears, so that no part of him was visible save his mobile and peaky face. My health is somewhat fragile, he remarked, as he led the way down the passage. I am compelled to be a valetudinarian? Valet... 1800s English, man. It's not valedictorian. Valetudinarian? Our cab was awaiting us outside, and our program was evidently prearranged, for the drivers started off at once at a rapid pace. Thaddeus Sholto talked incessantly, in a voice which rose high above the rattle of the wheels. Bartholomew is a clever fellow, said he. How do you think he found out where the treasure was? He had come to the conclusion that it was somewhere indoors, so he worked out all the cubic space of the house and made measurements everywhere, so that not 1 inch should be unaccounted for. Among other things, he found that the height of the building was 74 feet, but on adding together the heights of the separate rooms and making every allowance for the space between, which he ascertained by borings, he could not bring the total to more than 70 feet. There are 4 feet unaccounted for. I feel like it would be very easy to find those 4 feet, but whatever. These could only be at the top of the building. He knocked a hole, therefore, in the lath and plaster ceiling of the highest room, and there, sure enough, he came upon another little garret above it, which had been sealed up and was known to no one. In the center stood the treasure chest, resting upon 2 rafters. He lowered it through the hole, and there it lies. He computes the values of the jewels at not less than 500,000 sterling. At the mention of this gigantic sum, we all stared at one another open-eyed. Miss Mortson, could we secure her rights, would change from a needy governess to the richest heiress in England. All right, I'm going to look up how much 500,000 sterling is, because I feel like that could be a number. All right, so today that's $650,000. Or we all want. This is worth from so long ago. This is too complicated, but enough. Seems like a lot. Because a pound in 1800 Britain was worth about 100 today, so maybe like $60 million. Let's take that and let's move on. Not really important. At the mention of this gigantic sum, we all stared at one another open-eyed. Miss Mortson, could we secure her rights? Yeah, right. Could secure her rights would change from blah blah blah. Surely it was the place of a loyal friend to rejoice at such news. Yet I am ashamed to say that selfishness took me by the soul, and that my heart turned as heavy as lead within me. I stammered out some few halting words of congratulation, and then sat downcast, with my head drooped, deaf to the babble of our new acquaintance. He was clearly a confirmed hypochondriac, and I was dreamily conscious that he was pouring forth interminable trains of symptoms, and imploring information as to the composition and action of innumerable quack nostrums, some of which he bore about in a leather case in his pocket. I trust that he may not remember any of the answers which I gave him that night. Holmes declares that he overheard me caution him against the great danger of taking more than 2 drops of castor oil. What the heck? Did I miss like a noun in here? Maybe. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Well, I recommend strychnine in large doses as a sedative. However that may be, I was certainly relieved when our cab pulled up with a jerk and the coachman sprang down to open the door. This, Miss Mortson, is Potticherry Lodge, said Mr. Thaddeus Sholto as he handed her out. All right. Updating the stream title. Yeah, could you just imagine just finding like a dresser or a trunk in your attic worth $60 million? Boom. You could be in the world's top 1,000,000 richest people in the world. It was nearly 11 o'clock when we reached this final stage of our night's adventures. We had left the damp fog of the great city behind us, and the night was fairly fine. A warm wind blew from the westward, and heavy clouds moved slowly across the sky, with half a moon peeping occasionally through the rifts. It was clear enough to see for some distance, but Thaddeus Sholto took down one of the side lamps from the carriage to give us a better light upon our way. Potticherry Lodge stood in its own grounds, and was girt round with a very high stone wall topped with broken glass. A young narrow iron clamped door formed the only means of entrance. On this our guide knocked with a peculiar postman-like rat-tat. "Who is there?" cried a gruff voice from within. "It is I, McMurdo. You surely know my knock by this time." There was a grumbling sound and a clanking of jarring of keys. The door swung heavily back, and a short, deep-chested man stood in the opening, with the yellow light of the lantern shining upon his protruded face and twinkling distrustful eyes. "That you, Mr. Thaddeus? But who are the others? I had no orders about them from the master." "No, McMurdo, you surprise me. I told my brother last night that I should bring some friends. He ain't been out of his room today, Mr. Thaddeus, and I have no orders. You know very well that I must stick to regulations. I can let you in, but your friends must just stop where they are." This was an unexpected obstacle. Thaddeus Sholto looked about him in a perplexed and helpless manner. "This is too bad of you, McMurdo," he said. "If I guarantee them, that is enough for you. There is the young lady, too. She cannot wait on the public road at this hour." "Very sorry, Mr. Thaddeus," said the porter inexorably. "Folk may be friends of yours, and yet no friends of the master's. He pays me well to do my duty, and my duty I'll do. I don't know none of your friends." "Oh, yes, you do, McMurdo," cried Sherlock Holmes genially. "I don't think you can have forgotten me. Don't you remember the amateur who fought 3 rounds with you at Allison's room on the night of your benefit 4 years back?" "Not Mr. Sherlock Holmes," roared the prize-fighter. "God's truth, how could I have mistook you? If instead of standing there so quiet you had just stepped up and given me that cross hit of yours under the jaw, I'd have known you without a question. Ah, and you're one that has wasted your gifts, you have. You might have aimed high if you had joined the fancy. You see, Watson, if all else fails me, I have still one of the scientific professions open to me," said Holmes, laughing. "Our friend won't keep us out in the cold now, I'm sure." "In you come, sir, in you come, you and your friends," he answered. "Very sorry, Mr. Thaddeus, but orders are very strict. Had to be certain of your friends before I let them in." Inside, a gravel path wound through desolate grounds to a huge clump of a house, square and prosaic, all plunged in shadow, save where a moonbeam struck one corner and glimmered in a garret window. The vast size of the building, with its gloom and its deathly silence, struck a chill to the heart. Even Thaddeus Sholto seemed ill at ease, and the lantern quivered and rattled in his hand. I cannot understand it, he said. There must be some mistake. I distinctly told Bartholomew that we should be here, and yet there is no light in his window. I do not know what to make of it. Well, the chapter title is The Tragedy. So, does he always guard the premises in this way? Asked Holmes. Yes, he has followed my father's custom. He was the favorite son, you know, and I sometimes think that my father may have told him more than he ever told me. That is Bartholomew's window up there, where the moonshine strikes. It is quite bright, but there is no light from within, I think. None, said Holmes, but I see the glint of a light in that little window beside the door. Ah, that is the housekeeper's room. That is where old Mrs. Burnstone sits. She can tell us all about it. But perhaps you would not mind waiting here for a minute or two, for if we all go in together, and she has no word of our coming, she may be alarmed. But hush, what is that? He held up the lantern, and his hand shook until the circles of light flickered and wavered all round us. Miss Morton seized my wrist, and we all stood with thumping hearts, straining our ears. From the great black house there sounded through the silent night the saddest and most pitiful of sounds, the shrill, broken whimpering of a frightened woman. It is Mrs. Burnstone, said Sholto. She is the only woman in the house. Wait here. I shall be back in a moment. He hurried for the door and knocked in his peculiar way. We could see a tall old woman admit him and sway with pleasure at the very sight of him. Oh, Mr. Thaddeus, sir, I am so glad you have come. I am so glad you have come, Mr. Thaddeus, sir. We heard her reiterated rejoicings until the door was closed and her voice died away into a muffled monotone. Our guide had left us the lantern. Holmes swung it slowly around and peered keenly at the house and at the great rubbish heaps which cumbered the grounds. Miss Morton and I stood together, and her hand was in mine. A wondrous subtle thing is love, for here were we two. For here